Hi everyone, Onita here, how you going? I have a big pile of books right next to me, and these are all the books I'm terrified of reading for one reason or another, whether it's to do with the hype, whether I'm afraid it'll be too difficult for me, am I going to cry like a little bitch? I don't know, but for one reason or another, and even some I may not have mentioned, I am terrified of reading these books. Okay, book number 1 I'm terrified of reading. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. It is a sci-fi, and it's like a comedy sci-fi series. It's actually a complete trilogy of 5, so there's 5 books, but it's like essentially a trilogy. One Thursday lunchtime, the Earth is unexpectedly demolished to make way for a new hyperspatial express route for Arthur Dent, rescued by his best friend Ford, who even more unexpectedly turns out to be from another planet. This already seems rather a lot to cope with. Unfortunately, his travels have only just begun. The galaxy may offer a mind-boggling variety of ways to be blown up and insulted, but it's very hard to get a cup of tea. Because it is sci-fi, I see sci-fi to be these massive tomes of just scientific terminology that just goes over my head and that I don't properly understand, as well as being complicated as well with like complicated science. I have heard that this one is a pretty good place to start if you want to get into sci-fi, and I have read some sci-fi. I've read like about 3 sci-fi books now, and I'm actually surprised at how well I can comprehend the stuff going on, even with the science talk and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's still sci-fi as a genre is still daunting to me. Book number 2 I'm terrified of reading, American Gods by Neil Gaiman. I think the main reason why I'm terrified of reading this book, or just any Neil Gaiman book in general, is because of how weird and different his books are, especially American Gods. I have previously read another Neil Gaiman book, How the Marquis Got His Coat Back. It's an incredibly like short, tiny little book. Incredible, like it really truly was incredible. With that small, like teeny tiny book, the first book I've read of Neil Gaiman, I was so incredibly lost within his world, and are the other books gonna live up to the hype or the expectations that I have put on Neil Gaiman? Like that, it's just terrifying. Oh, it smells like an old book. Ooh, and this one has like extra material. It has like a novella in it, The Monarch of the Glen, so that's awesome. We have another Neil Gaiman book, and that is Good Omens, by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. Again, just the hype, and similar to what I said about with American Gods, just the hype and how different and weird this book could be. I heard it's quite funny, and I'm a little worried that I'm not going to understand the humor. And it is such a beloved book, this one. Everyone loves this book, so the hype also adds to me being scared to read this book as well. Again, like with most of the books on this list, this one is a beloved book, and that is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I love historical fiction, so I don't think the historical fiction aspect is what is making me... Ooh, it's got pictures, drawings. Sorry, I was just looking through the book. Anyway, the historical fiction aspect of this book is not what is scaring me about reading this. It's the hype. And everyone loves this book, and apparently I heard that the movie isn't that bad either. Don't quote me 100% on that, but I've heard that the book, well, yes, the book and the movie is also good as well. And also, is this book going to make me cry? I don't like books that make me cry, even though I've read some books that have made me cry. I still don't like it because with crying means pain. And yeah, and it's also written from the perspective of death. It's like from, yeah, the perspective of death himself, and just that perspective alone is making me a little scared and worried to read it as well. But hopefully I won't be too scared to read it, because like I said, I have read historical fiction before and have loved it, so that aspect won't make me scared, but I'm still terrified of reading it. I hope I can get all of these books in the shot. But the next one is actually a continuation of a series. That is the Dune series by Frank Herbert. Just like I said before with the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's sci-fi, and sci-fi is still a daunting, terrifying genre to me, even though I'm reading more sci-fi and I'm enjoying it. So, yeah, I've heard a lot of people say good things about the rest of the series, especially, which one is it? Children of Dune and God Emperor of Dune. I've heard really good things about. I'm just going to put these down because I'm afraid that I'm going to drop them. And also, like, a sci-fi, I'm afraid it's going to go way over my head. But I've heard that all of these books deal with themes. And I think each book follows like a different theme. I think Children of Dune, no, not Children of Dune, Dune Messiah, the second one follows Paul Atreides, not Atreides. And just, I don't know, I'm just terrified of reading it, and I have all these beautiful editions of it. So I better not like it. I ended up reading the first one last year in December. Loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. I think I want to do a reread once I get a little bit more sci-fi books under my belt. Thoroughly enjoyable. I can definitely see the themes that are present in Dune, and if I just focus on the themes and me knowing that all the books follow themes, then hopefully, fingers crossed, I should be okay. But I'm still terrified of reading it because it is sci-fi. It's still a new to me genre in a way, and I'm worried I'm not going to understand it at all. Bonus points if you can guess why I'm terrified of reading this next book. Have you guessed why? The crying, the pain. A lot of people I've seen online have cried over this book and have felt such pain over this book. I have said before, it is not the first time I have read a book that has made me cry. But just the subject matter, and I heard it gets really dark, and the subject matter is something I don't know if I'm prepared to read about. That is the one and only reason why I'm terrified of reading this book. And when I get to reading it, I'm not looking forward to that, to the crying, the pain. I'm not looking forward to it at all. The next one is actually a 3-book bind-up. That is 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. It's a beast. Long books don't terrify me, and don't forget, like I said, it's 3 books in one. It's like a bind-up edition. I have heard mixed feelings about this, from it being a really good starting point into getting into Haruki Murakami's books to people having mixed feelings about it and being difficult to read. I have also heard that the further you get into the books, the more that the plot develops and the more it starts to make sense, I think. I think this book involves like alternate realities or parallel universes or something like that. And it does have a magical realism aspect with it as well. I have not read a lot of magical realism, but I'm looking forward to it, I really am. But also being scared. Like, the fact that magical realism and it's being along the line of fantasy kind of in a way. I have actually read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and that one is considered to be magical realism, but I'm still terrified of reading it. And just the hype. I heard this is like a really good one too. I don't think I mentioned the hype. I'm really, really nervous to read this one. And also, before I leave on that note, the magical realism aspect is something I'm not really certain if I would enjoy, even though I have read a teeny tiny bit, but not a great deal of it. Do you notice a bit of a theme happening? A lot of these books on this list that I have mentioned that I'm terrified of reading are huge, gigantic books. And the same is no different for this one. I'm scared of reading this. The Stand by Stephen King. A lot of people's favorite books. The hype, and it is fucking huge. Look at it. It is 1,325 pages. At least this edition is anyway. I have read It by Stephen King. Loved it. It took me 3 weeks to read it. And It was an enjoyable 3 weeks though, because when I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, it took me 3 weeks. What is wrong with me today? It took me 3 weeks to read that book, but I hated it. I could not stand that book at all. But it had no problem. 3 enjoyable weeks of reading it, and just, oh my god, the hype. And the TV show, especially the new one, I don't know. I might just stick with the book. It's like a lot of these books on my list are long books, and long books don't put me off. I'm just worried that there's going to be like a whole bunch of nothing in the middle of this book. I'm worried not a lot is going to happen. Oh my god. The last book, well, it's not technically the last book, but the last book I have physically before we get into like the ebook area of it. That is Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. So many Aegons. Throughout the history of the Targaryens, there have been like fucking thousands or hundreds of Aegons. And that is one of the reasons why I'm terrified. Actually, that is the one and only reason why I'm terrified of reading this book. So many Aegons. Like, am I going to get confused over which Aegon is which? I just hope there's like a distinction between the Aegons throughout history of the Targaryens. A lot of people might consider this to be a bit info-dumpy, this book, but it's a history of the Targaryens. The way I see it, it's a fictional autobiography. So that shouldn't worry me at all, because I've read books that have been info-dumpy and I've enjoyed them. I'm also realizing that I'm scared and yet at the same time not scared to read these books, but a lot of these books have one reason why, or multiple reasons why I am scared. And oh my god, yes, I'm gonna put this down now because it's making me a little nervous picking up all those big books. Okay, we are going to get into the ebook part of it. I don't actually have these books on there, but these are books that are definitely on the priority list. First one being Gardens of the Moon. It is the first book in the Malazane Book of the Fallen series by Stephen Erickson. This book is incredibly difficult to explain what it is about and what the synopsis is. And that's not what is scaring me. What is scaring me is I have been wanting to read this book for years. Years before BookTube, before I even knew BookTube and Bookstagram existed. And I'm just worried that I have high expectations for it. The hype. This is such an incredibly popular book series. And it's, yeah, it's just, I'm getting nervous. All these books, and I'm terrified to read them, but I'm gonna have to read them. So I'm gonna quickly run through the rest before I have a crisis talk with myself. The Name of the Wind. It is the first book in the King Killer Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. Again, the hype from me, from other people, the fact you still have to wait for the 3rd book. I've read the A Song of Ice and Fire series twice, and I'm still waiting for Winds of Winter. So the waiting shouldn't be, like, putting me off, but it kind of is. I've heard he has incredibly flowery writing and just stunning writing. That is making me want to read it. But the same with Gardens of the Moon. I'm sorry if you see me wriggling around my back a sore today. I have been meaning to read this book even before BookTube and Bookstagram, like before I even knew those things existed. And the same goes with The Lies of Locke Lamora, the first book in the series of the Gentleman Bastards series by Scott Lynch. The same goes with this book, like in Gardens of the Moon and The Name of the Wind. I think I'm hyping this book up a little bit too much with the fact that, like those other 2 books I mentioned, that I've been wanting to read this series before I knew about BookTube and Bookstagram, and I'm worried that I've hyped it up a little bit too much for myself. The rest of it I think I'll be fine with, is just the hype. Last 2. The first one, or the last 2, being The Eye of the World, the first book in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. The length of the series doesn't bother me at all. It's just the slog. That middle portion, I think it's between like books 7 and 12 or 8 and 12. Those ones. The slog that is scaring me from reading this book. Nor is it the constant repetition like what is it? Is it the hair tugging and skirt sniffing or skirt tugging and hair sniffing? I don't know, but I've heard that he gets quite repetitive, and the description of detail, which doesn't bother me. Like, I really love descriptive writing. It just makes the world feel much more realistic and real, and like I could almost touch it. It's just those books in the slog. There's 4 or 5 or however many books in the slog that is, like, deterring me, kind of, I guess you could say, from reading these books. Like, from what I understand, it's just a lot of characters doing nothing. But I've heard a lot of people say, well, actually I've heard some people say that the slog is not as bad. And there have been books where not a lot has happened plot-wise and it's just more character-focused, and I've enjoyed them. But yet I'm still scared to read this series. The last book is The Assassins Apprentice. It is the first book in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. And these books, there's 5 sets of trilogies, and it all takes place in the Elderling universe, I believe. Like, I don't know all the names of the trilogies that exist. I don't know them off by heart, but they are out there and they do exist. And the crying, the pain, the torture that Fitz goes through. A lot of people love Fitz, and I'm not prepared for that at all. How badly does Fitz get hurt for people to cry over this character? It mustn't be good for people to cry and throw their book across the room. And that is all for this video. Thank you so much. One thing I've learned is that, 1, a lot of the books that scare me on this list are long books. I have read long books before. They don't scare me at all. I actually enjoy a good long book. Also, I realised that I'm both scared and not scared to read these books. Like, I think me being not scared being that I like the challenge, but being scared because some of the elements I've heard in some of these books, and just my own worry that I put upon myself. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm still nervous to read these books I've given you the names of. It's just, I want the challenge of reading it and conquering my fears of reading things that scare me. That is the end of the video. Like I said, thank you so very much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like, leave a comment down below on what you think about these terrifying books. Have you read any of them? What are they like? Let me know down below. Make sure to subscribe if you want to, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!